What's up guys, welcome to this review of WandaVision, the standalone limited series set in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Here, Wanda and Vision are living an idyllic life in this small town in somewhere in America, it seems. But something's odd because they also seem to be living a life inspired by sitcoms. So what the hell's going on there? Well, let me first start this review by saying that first let me give you my opinion and then we'll get into what I have to say. My opinion is this: WandaVision is good. At times it's great, and at other times it's less than good. But I don't think it's ever bad. There are some like smack in your face, like wow, that's a bad decision, but each episode I think at the worst is okay, with a couple of them being great. So overall, good. I like WandaVision quite a bit. I think it's a bold, new step in a really cool, interesting direction for the MCU. Plenty of possibilities on the horizon because of this show. Now, what I was going to say is that this review, from now on, is going to be full of spoilers. Because it's really hard to talk about this show without spoiling something. Because there's so many theories, so many possibilities, so many little things that were revealed throughout the show that if I don't touch on those things, it feels like I'm omitting them, it feels like I'm missing out on them. So suffice to say, if you're a Marvel fan, if you're a fan of the MCU, go watch this show. Like, that's a no-brainer. This is part of the MCU, it's going to be an integral part of the MCU as well, it seems. So check this out, you'd be stupid not to. It's only 9 episodes, each episode ranges from between like half an hour to 45 minutes, with most of them being about half an hour. So go check it out. But now on, full spoiler, so if you haven't seen WandaVision, go watch it. One of the things I liked about WandaVision is the overall message and themes of what this show is actually about. So ignore the superpower stuff, ignore the superheroes, ignore the Marvel stuff. This is a show about grief. It's a show about trying to come to terms with loss. It's a show that's all about emotions and characters and diving into them. And it works really well doing that. But that's the overarching thing. You can actually split this show into multiple different segments. So the first 3 episodes, for example, are very inspired by classic sitcoms. You got I Love Lucy in the first episode, then it's like the Dick Van Dyke Show as well. It goes on to like the Brady Bunch, and I'm missing one out, Bewitched, that's the other one. These 3 episodes feel like standalone little things that are all about like exploring the relationship between Wanda and Vision. And it works in that without these 3 episodes, you wouldn't care so much about their relationship later on, because this establishes their characters so that later on they can go off and do the more investigative stuff and trying to figure out what the hell's going on. However, these 3 episodes, I don't think they needed to be 3 episodes. I think maybe 2 episodes at most. And doing my research into this, it looks like they actually had more episodes planned, but then they cut them down and condensed them. Well, I think they probably should have done that again, because on trying to rewatch this, I can totally imagine that these 3 episodes might drag a little. These 3 episodes might feel a little throwy, a little too much of like a side story that's unnecessary. Really, we should have probably had 1 hour-long episode to start things off, which combined everything from these first 3 episodes or something like that. And I think that would have been a really good way to kick things off. And the problem is that each of these 3 episodes plays out like a very classic, typical sitcom. They absolutely nail it. They nail the tone, the comedy, the stylings of these sitcoms. They really do feel like they're paying homage to these sitcoms and they've done their research on them. So it's all brilliant on that front. But in terms of the story and the progression of the story and the character arcs, there's very little that actually happens there. So a lot of stuff does feel like it's just a bit of a gimmick. It's just them having a bit of fun. But we don't need it. At least we don't need all of it. But the other side of this show is what's going on outside of the town, outside of the sitcom realm, outside of the hex as it ends up being called. And that is very much more like a mystery investigation, almost like an X-Files kind of thing, where the main characters outside are Randall Park's character, I think he's called Wu, and a new character called Monica Rambeau, who actually isn't a new character because she was in Captain Marvel just as a kid. So these characters are fascinating, they've got great chemistry together, and they're the ones that are primarily investigating this, along with a group known as SWORD. So there's that. That's all cool and interesting. What this means though is that there's an element of teasing things out. There's an element of getting answers and trying to figure out what's going on. There's a big mystery that we, the audience, are trying to figure out at the same time as these characters. And as it turns out, by the end of the season, a lot of the things that they were teasing earlier on, a lot of the things that they were hinting at earlier on, were not really all that important or relevant, because there are many things that are left unanswered by the end of the show, and that's disappointing. And then some of the times when they do start to answer it, when they do try to tell us like, right, this is what's going on, this is how it's working, this is what's happening, a lot of the times it is just characters sitting at a laptop saying, oh, look at that, that's what's happening. And it's like, right, okay, that seems like a really lazy way of telling us, but I get it. You've just came up with this fantastical idea, and now you're just trying to quickly write a way to explain it without getting too bogged down. I get it, it has to be like that. But it does feel like these characters are sometimes really stumped at certain points, but then coming up with the answers really quickly as well. So that's a little odd. But overall, I've talked about these characters on the outside. As it turns out, by the end of the show though, the only characters that actually matter in this show are Wanda, of course, Vision, of course, and the main villain, Agatha Harkness. Everyone else is just kind of there, as it turns out, to do usually just one thing at one point in this show. So by the end of the season, particularly in like the final 2 episodes, Wu and Monica Rambeau don't really have a lot to do. Kat Dennings is in there as well, and I think this is the biggest example. Kat Dennings has like a 5-second appearance in the final episode. Why? Why did they have these characters in there if ultimately they weren't going to do anything with them? So yes, it's interesting that we get to see these characters, it's cool that we get to see these characters, but give them something to do. They have to be important somehow, and it can't just be Kat Dennings is here to explain the science, Monica Rambeau is here to challenge the Hex, Wu's here as well to show off his magic. I don't know what Wu's there for, to be honest. I think he's just there to be a good guy on the investigation side of things. But yeah, a lot of these side characters, a lot of these supporting characters feel like they're important early on, but then it becomes quickly apparent that no, they're just kind of there to help push the story along, and not always in important or relevant ways. So I mentioned earlier how this show has a couple of great moments. One of which is the second last episode, which is a flashback episode, diving into Wanda's past, how she developed her powers, how she went from being basically orphaned during a war to, being with Hydra, and what happened with her brother and their relationship together. That was the best episode in the whole season, I thought, because it actually dived into the character in a new, interesting ways and fleshed her out a lot more. Now, in contrast to that, the worst episode was the last episode. The problem with the last episode is that it failed to meet expectations. So the problem is, by releasing this on a week-to-week basis, by making it like a mystery show with so many questions and theories and so much speculation, the final episode just couldn't live up to the hype. The final episode is not a bad episode, it's an okay episode. But a lot of the answers were just the easy answer. They took the easy way out, it seems, in a lot of these instances. And I'm going to get into one of the ways in which this happened, which I really did not like. But there's a lot of theories, a lot of mysteries, and they just go, yeah, it was that. It was that. There was nothing in the final episode that made me go, wow. There was nothing in the final episode that surprised me or shocked me, at least not in a good way. And that's why the final episode is the weakest. It also doesn't help that in the final episode, it is essentially, half of it is just a big fight. You've got 2 witches fighting each other, and then 2 versions of Vision fighting each other. It's very classic, generic superhero, final boss confrontation thing. Good witch, evil witch. Good Vision, evil Vision. I mean, come on. You don't get any more generic superhero stuff than that. And because it's a TV show, because it doesn't have the budget of a MCU movie, a lot of the fight stuff, a lot of the action scenes in this show, they are lacking sometimes. They don't have the budget invested into them, they don't have the CGI and special effects invested into them. So it does feel like they are limited with what they can do. But one of the things that you might have noticed is that I've split this into chunks. So you've got the first chunk being homage to sitcoms, you've got the second chunk being all about the mystery and the investigation, then you've got the final chunk which is all about the superhero stuff, getting into much more classic Marvel territory. Now the problem of this is that the show struggles with identity. What's this show actually trying to do? Forget what it's about, forget what the story is. What's the purpose of this show? Is it trying to pay homage to sitcoms? Is it trying to be a romantic comedy drama? Is it trying to be a mystery? Is it trying to be an action series? Is it trying to be a superhero show? And it seems that the show's actually trying to be all of these things at once. And while it nails the homage to the sitcom, it does miss the mark in that why? Why is it being an homage to sitcoms? It does explain that in the final episode, in the second to last episode actually, where she was brought up watching this content. So we get why the sitcom stuff is important to that character. But why is it important to us? I don't know. And what this means is that the overall purpose of the show is sometimes a little vague and unclear. By the end of the show, I think they do hammer home that, hey, this is a show about grief, this is a show about loss, it's a show about relationships coming to an end and trying to move on from that. And if you were to ask me what it's about early on, I would not have said that at all. And trying to look back on it, I don't think the first half of the series is building on that at all. In fact, I think it's doing quite the opposite, which is a bit of a problem. So the last thing I want to talk about in terms of character is Wanda's fate and how Wanda's story ends. So Wanda is a villain. I mean, she started as a villain in the MCU, then she became a good guy. And then in this show, we're not sure if she's a good guy or a villain until about halfway through, when it's very clear, no, she's holding this town hostage. She's bringing people back from the dead. She's preventing children from seeing their parents. She's being selfish, she's being greedy, she's being taken over by emotion. And it's all very compelling, very interesting stuff. But by the end of the show, there's no repercussions for her. Everyone's like, right, we understand why you've done this. Monica Rambeau, for example, is like, hey, it's all over with now. And Wanda's like, yep, and then she just walks off scot-free. It's like, hold on. You held a town hostage. They were clearly distressed. They clearly hate you. You took their lives away from them. You robbed children from their parents and so on. Also, you could live out this idyllic life, this fantastical life. Right, and now you're just gonna go, and no one's gonna stop you. Now, in fairness, she's of course an all-powerful witch, so who the hell is gonna stop her? But someone needs to bring this up, right? She can't just walk away. But no, that's exactly what happens, and it's bizarre. It's almost as if by the end of the show's kind of saying, yeah, she's a villain, but just ignore that, pretend that didn't happen. Don't think about it too much, I think is what the show's trying to say at the end of things. But we'll just have to wait and see where it goes in that regard. Maybe they will answer that, maybe they will have repercussions for Wanda in the future. But let's talk about the characters, particularly Wanda and Vision. These are the main characters, their relationship is the core of this series. They're brilliant. I think, what's her name? Elizabeth Olsen? I think she's amazing in this show. I think this is the best performance she's done in any Marvel property that she's been involved in. Vision, of course, he's always great. This Vision is a little different from the ones we get in the films because there's actually a lot more going on with him. He's a lot more quirky, there's a lot more depth to him. And I think that's because this isn't actually the real Vision, this is Wanda's vision of Vision. So he does have a bit more personality, he does have a bit more humour to him, he does have a lot more emotion to him. And they've got great chemistry together. They feel like a living, breathing, real life couple. And it's incredible. And superhero TV shows, they often don't get much in the way of awards or any sort of really serious critical attention. I would not be surprised at all if these two get some sort of acknowledgement that way on, particularly Elizabeth Olsen. Then you've got to talk about the villain. The main villain is to reveal later on is Agatha Harkness. So she's played by Kathryn Hahn. Great performance from her. She's very cool, very creepy. But at the end of the day, she is kind of a stereotypical straight-faced villain. She's a little on the cheesy side, a little on the comical side, but it works. It fits into this world that they've established. In the final episode, the fight with Wanda, I was getting major Halloween Town vibes. That's not always a good thing because Halloween Town is dated and cheesy and corny. It works in this show. Again, it's not going quite the Halloween Town area, but just the look of the character and what she's saying and how she's doing it felt very Halloween Town to me. There's another villainous character in the show who I think he was called Hawking or I can't remember. Anyway, he's the leader of SWORD. He's introduced as this leader of this like government division. What's this government division do? Well, I don't know. I'm not familiar with SWORD from the comic books, so I'm not quite sure. They did show up at the end of Captain Marvel, so we know they're a thing already. We know they're going to be important. So this guy is probably the worst character in the show. Nothing against the performance, I think he's doing the best with what he's given, but he does come across as a very just typical bad guy. He's a bad guy doing bad things because he's bad, and it doesn't really make sense. Final episode, he just runs into the town and bam, he's trying to shoot kids for no real reason. Yeah, what the hell happened to him? Why did he go from at least having an agenda and motive to just flat out trying to kill everyone? It doesn't make sense. And ultimately, he didn't even need to be in the show. In fact, a lot of the side characters, a lot of the supporting characters did not need to be in the show. Certain characters could have been omitted, certain characters could have been combined, like Wu and Monica Rambeau for example. I like them, I like their chemistry, but really we only ever needed one of them. Combine their characters into one role and the show plays out exactly the same. And in relation to this, Kat Dennings, I like her character, I like Kat Dennings. She's a cool character, she comes in and it's very clear that she's a plot device. She's there to explain the science behind all of this. And then once she's explained the science behind all of this, they don't really have much of anything for her to do. So Monica Rambeau, this is the first time that we're really getting like a fleshing out of this character. She's a superhero character. I'm not familiar with her from the comic books. I don't know much of anything about her. I couldn't even tell you what her superhero name is. But she has basically an origin story in this show. And I think she's a very interesting, very fascinating character. The problem though is that she didn't need to be in this show, and by having her origins mixed in with this show, it does feel like they're rushing through it, to the point where by the end of this show, I couldn't tell you what her powers are. She shows off her powers, she shows off what she's capable of, but I have no way in knowing how to explain them, or where they came from, or how they came to be, or anything really. So it's odd. It does feel like her origins have been shoehorned in a little bit. So let's talk about White Vision. So White Vision shows up in the second last episode. He is basically the bad guy Vision who's going to fight Vision in the last episode. I was getting major vibes from Star Trek The Next Generation and Star Trek Nemesis particularly with B4 and Commander Data. Commander Data gets destroyed, but guess what? B4 is able to download his memories. It turns out that didn't actually happen because, well, Star Trek Picard kind of retconned that. But yeah, it was very reminiscent of that, and it feels like White Vision is going to be used as a scapegoat, as a bit of an excuse to bring Vision back in the future of the MCU. Which is cool, I'm fine with that, but it does mean that Vision's now had 2 deaths, and the first one was really impactful, really important. The second one in this show was emotional to an extent, but because we know White Vision's still out there because he just flew off and went God only knows where, we know that there's a possibility that he's going to come back. So the second death that he has in this show kind of lost something because of that. If death doesn't mean anything, why should I care? But let's talk about the big thing. This is the thing that I at first thought was absolutely brilliant, but then by the end of the season, I thought was awful. Quicksilver. So Quicksilver shows up in this, but guess what? It's not the Quicksilver from the MCU. No. It's the Quicksilver from the Fox X-Men movies. Because Disney now owns Fox, so they can bring in the X-Men. So he shows up, it's absolutely brilliant, it's cool, it's a great cliffhanger. We then find out that he's been recast somehow. Is he from the multiverse? Is he from a different universe? Is he the Fox X-Men Quicksilver that we all know and love? And then all of these mysteries surrounded him, and in the final episode, it turns out none of it's true. He's just a random bloke who happens to look like the Fox X-Men character, and the answer to all of this is a dick joke. Like really, all of this leads up to a really bad dick joke. And this just feels like a huge slap in the face to every Marvel X-Men film fan there is. Why? Why do this at all? Like, seriously. If you were just going to do this, why have Quicksilver in the show at all? Like, he's not even that important to the show, let's face it. Like, he's only there to make Wanda confused for like one episode, and then he's kind of gone. He does pop in here and there, but he's got no real reason for being there. So why does it have to be Evan Peters? Why are you trolling us like this? Because that's what this is. It's Marvel coming out and just trying to have some fun at the expense of the fans. It feels really like nasty in a way. But I am hearing rumours that Evan Peters is actually going to be back playing this character once more, just in Doctor Strange and the multiverse of madness. So if that's true, maybe we are still going to develop on this. Maybe he will eventually be the Quicksilver we all know and love from that. I don't know how they're going to do it. But right now it just feels like there's so much possibilities with this, so much potential with this, and they just threw it in our face and we're having to laugh at our expense, all for the sake of a terrible joke. So I've already talked a little about the production. They absolutely nailed the sitcom homage, from the aspect ratio, the colour, the old-fashioned special effects in the early episodes where they're clearly on like strings and stuff like that. That was all cool, really well done. They've done their homework, and I think the production designers on this show are going to get some really good attention come awards season. Acting across the board is great. Some of the characters don't get too much to do, but that's not their fault. The sound, the music, the score is great too. It works really well because it's quirky and fun early on, but then there are some dark and ominous moments where the sudden shift in tone, it really works quite well. You would think that it would be jarring, but it's not. It actually blends in quite well. And then there are subtle homages to other Marvel themes and songs throughout the show as well. That's all really good. On a production level, this show is immaculate, although it should be said, the CGI, not Marvel film standards, it is TV, really good TV quality CGI. The special effects aren't always brilliant. The action scenes, for example, are quite frankly a little boring, but I think that is because they were limited by budget and time and so on. It's worth saying that I think the final episode was filmed during the pandemic, so maybe that had an impact on the production side of things. Maybe that's why Kat Dennings only had one scene in the final episode. Maybe because they were trying to figure out the whole social distancing thing, maybe they're trying to sort out scheduling and trying to be safe and something, that they had to limit what they could do in the final episode or something. I don't know, I'm just speculating here. And maybe I'm completely wrong, maybe it wasn't filmed in the pandemic, but I think it might have been. But anyway, WandaVision. Overall, good. Plenty of twists and turns, lots of surprises, great drama, great relationship at the core of the show. It's a shame that the ending kind of went in a little straightforward, generic superhero approach, but again, not bad, just it could have been a little bit more. But yeah, WandaVision is good overall. Sometimes it's great, sometimes it's less than okay. Sometimes it's less than good, sorry. And that's all I've got to say about WandaVision. Let me know in the comments and feedback what you think of WandaVision. And of course, follow me on Twitter and Instagram at @the_Grant_Burton if you want all of my thoughts and opinions up to date as I get them. You can also subscribe to my channel, that's the most important thing. Please subscribe if you want more content like this. And until next time, thanks for watching.